Okay, after our week of funny OC characters, I think I'm gonna need to cut off all my senses so that I can see God. Gateway of the Mind is a short and sweet affair. The pasta details an experiment wherein a man had his nervous system completely shut down. It's hypothesized that with no connections to the mortal world, he'll be able to make contact with God. Oh, he sees God all right, but he doesn't have good news. To quote the story, I've spoken with God, and he has abandoned us. Even before that, he gets contacted by the dead family members of the researchers and hundreds of other lost souls. All in all, the scientists were proved right, but the results were more horrific than expected. Compare it to the Russian sleep experiment, but I think Gateway came off as more realistic. Instead of a whole bunch of test subjects turning into zombies and tearing people apart, it goes for something relatively more subtle. The cosmic horror angle of all these beings speaking through the old man can be really horrific if you give it enough thought. The short length helps make it even more credible. I used the term matter of fact when I brought up those Pokemon creepypastas, and it applies here. The author is a very good liar. Even though the nervous system is a lot more complex than the story would have you believe, it would probably be really hard to do, if not impossible, to cut off the senses in the way the story describes. Sensory deprivation is a thing, not severing all your nerves, but you've seen in movies and on TV people floating in those big pods with salt water. The worst I've read about it in my research for this video is that maybe you can be a little uncomfortable or have minor hallucinations. No chance of talking to the dead. Sensory tanks can actually have a lot of positive effects, kinda like meditation. Mind you, it also seems like any Joe Schmo can just buy a few of these and put them in a strip mall and charge people hundreds of dollars per session. Most pro-sensory tank rhetoric you're gonna find is from these people. Maybe they're trying to shill their own business, or maybe once you sign up for an hour in the pod, they sever all your nerves and then you get to hear the screams of the damned. You never know. The video associated with Gateway of the Mind isn't even related to the story at all. It's a random performance art piece by a guy named Oliver de Sagazan, I think. The piece is called Transfiguration, and in it he slaps a bunch of mud and clay and other stuff on him, and turns himself into all these weird creatures. There's a lot you can get out of it if you look for meaning, but I like to think it's either about how we all have to put on different faces around different people and settings, or you can look at it in a different way and say it's about how humans have this innate desire to be or act like other people, and this is some kind of representation of that in the most primal animalistic way. Play the part where he farts. A few years ago, there was a one-off analog horror based on the story. While I think it's too abridged and some of the font choices aren't accurate for the era the story takes place, it's a really cool way to adapt it. Show what the man in the story is seeing and hearing directly. Gateway of the Mind is another story that was begging for a Channel Zero season. Overall, a nice spooky little story.